The phone rang just as I was finalizing the risk assessment for a merger between two mid-sized tech firms. It was a chaotic Tuesday. My desk was buried under spreadsheets and red-lined contracts, the kind of organized chaos that usually calmed me because it made sense. Numbers made sense. Debt-to-income ratios made sense. My mother, Linda, did not make sense. I looked at the screen. Mom. I let it ring twice, taking a deep breath, preparing my customer service voice. Hi, Mom. Is everything okay? I answered, cradling the phone between my ear and shoulder while I continued typing. Chloe, you need to send the money for the anniversary party today, she said. No hello. No asking how her grandson was. Just the demand. Sarah found this incredible caterer, but they need the deposit by 5 o'clock, or we lose the slot. I paused my typing. Mom, we talked about this. I already sent $2,000 for the venue. You said the catering was going to be potluck style, remember? Aunt Marge was making her lasagna. Oh, don't be cheap, Chloe, my mother sighed, the sound crackling with that familiar disappointment. It's our 40th anniversary. Sarah said potluck looks tacky. She wants it to be elegant. She's trying so hard to make this special for us. The least you can do is support her vision. Support her vision. That was the family motto. Sarah had the vision, I had the checkbook. How much is the deposit? I asked, closing my eyes and pinching the bridge of my nose. $1,500, she said quickly. I'll text you Sarah's Zelle info again. $1,500. That was a mortgage payment for some people. For me, it was doable, but that wasn't the point. The point was that I was the one working 60-hour weeks as a senior forensic auditor, hunting down hidden assets and exposing corporate fraud, while Sarah was building her brand as a lifestyle influencer on Instagram, a career that seemed to involve buying a lot of beige furniture and drinking wine at 2 p.m. Fine, I said, my voice flat. I'll send it. But that's it, Mom. I have to pay for Leo's piano lessons and my own bills. You make plenty, Chloe. Don't guilt-trip me, she snapped before softening her tone, a tactic she'd perfected over decades. We just want everyone together. Saturday. 5 p.m. Don't be late and please, dress Leo in something nice. Not those raggedy sneakers. They aren't raggedy, they're orthopedic because of his arches, but okay. We'll be there. I hung up and stared at the dark screen of my phone. I felt that familiar heaviness in my chest, a mixture of resentment and resignation. I was the provider. The reliable one. The one who had made it out of our small town, got the degree, got the high-paying job in the city. And because I had succeeded, I apparently owed them a perpetual tax. I opened my banking app. My balance was healthy, very healthy. I had invested wisely, lived below my means, and the life insurance payout from David's accident 5 years ago had been put into a high-yield trust for Leo. I was sitting on a net worth of over $2 million, but I drove a 6-year-old Honda Accord and bought my clothes at outlets. Why? Because if my family knew how much I actually had, they would pick me clean like vultures on a carcass. I transferred the $1,500 to Sarah. Transaction complete. That evening, I picked up Leo from school. He was 10, with David's dark curls and a sensitivity that made my heart ache. He was sitting on the bench alone, reading a book about marine biology. Hey, buddy, I said, unlocking the car. Ready for pizza night? He climbed in, buckling his seatbelt meticulously. Do we have to go to Aunt Sarah's on Saturday? Even he felt it. Children are like emotional barometers, they detect low-pressure systems long before the storm hits. Yeah, we do. It's for Grandma and Grandpa, I said, trying to sound cheerful. Uncle Mark is mean, Leo said quietly, looking out the window. And Dylan and Sophie make fun of my glasses. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. If Uncle Mark says anything mean to you, you tell me immediately, okay? And Dylan and Sophie are just, they aren't raised like you, Leo. You're kind. That's a superpower. It doesn't feel like a superpower, he muttered. I drove us home, my mind racing. I was tired. I was so tired of protecting everyone. I protected the bank from fraud. I protected my clients from bad investments. I protected Leo from the harsh reality of losing his father. But who protected me? The notification popped up on my phone later that night. Transaction alert, $2,000 charged to supplementary card ending in 4489. It was the emergency credit card I had given my parents for medical emergencies only. I clicked on the details. The merchant wasn't a pharmacy or a hospital. It was Lux Travel and Spa. I stared at the glowing screen in my dark kitchen. They hadn't just asked for catering money. They had booked a spa trip on my dime, on the same day they claimed to be short on cash. I didn't call them. I didn't scream. I just felt something inside me shift. It was a small click, like a lock tumbling into place. I downloaded the statement, printed it out, and put it in a manila folder. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. If that's how we're playing. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was an auditor. And I was about to start an audit on my own family. Saturday arrived with a humid, oppressive heat that made my blouse stick to my back before I even got out of the car. Sarah's house was in a new development called Oak Haven Estates, one of those neighborhoods where every house looks like a McMansion trying too hard to be a castle. I parked my Honda behind Mark's leased BMW X5. As I unbuckled Leo, I looked at the house. From a distance it looked impressive. But my job is to look at the details. I saw the gutters overflowing with dead leaves. I saw the patch of dead grass near the garage that they had tried to spray paint green. I saw the algae bloom starting in the corner of the pool in the backyard. This was a house of people who were drowning, but were too busy waving to the crowd to grab a life preserver. Remember, I told Leo, smoothing his collar. Headphones are in your bag if it gets too loud. Just give me a signal. Okay, Mom, he said, clutching his book to his chest like a shield. We walked in. The air conditioning was blasting, and the house smelled of expensive perfume and stress. Sarah came rushing over, holding a glass of white wine. She was wearing a dress that I knew cost at least $600. Chloe. You're finally here, she said, giving me an air kiss that didn't touch my skin. She looked me up and down. Oh. You wore that? I thought you were going to buy something new. It was a navy blue wrap dress. Classic, professional, clean. It's fine, Sarah. Happy anniversary to Mom and Dad. Yeah, well, try to stay out of the background of my stories, okay? It doesn't really fit the vibe, she whispered, winking as if it were a joke. It wasn't. Mark was in the living room, holding court with my father and a few neighbors. Mark was the kind of guy who used words like synergy and hustle unironically. He was currently unemployed, had been for 8 months, but you'd never know it to hear him talk. I'm just leveraging my network right now, Mark was booming, swirling a whiskey. Got a few irons in the fire. Big tech startups. They need leadership, you know. Someone with vision. He saw me, and his smile didn't reach his eyes. Well, if it isn't the number cruncher. How's the exhilarating world of, what is it again? Spreadsheets. Forensic auditing, I corrected calmly. Catching thieves, mostly. Mark's eye twitched. Just a fraction of a millimeter. Right. Sounds thrilling. Hey, thanks for the catering cash. Saved the day. Cash flow is all tied up in investments right now, you know how it is. I bet, I said. I found my parents by the buffet table. My mother was showing off a new bracelet to Aunt Marge. Oh, Chloe bought it for me, Mom lied smoothly. She insisted. I hadn't bought that bracelet. I realized with a sick sinking feeling that the $2,000 charge at the spa probably included a gift shop purchase. She was wearing stolen money and claiming it was a gift. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad, I said. Chloe, Dad grunted. He looked at Leo. Boy needs a haircut. Looks like a girl. He likes it long, I said, my hand instinctively going to Leo's shoulder. He needs a father, Dad muttered, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Needs a man to toughen him up. He's always reading. Why isn't he outside playing football with Dylan? Because Dylan throws the ball at his head, Dad, I replied, keeping my voice level. Boys will be boys. You coddle him, Dad dismissed me, turning back to the buffet. This shrimp is excellent. Sarah really outdid herself. I felt like I was suffocating. Every interaction was a microaggression, a tiny cut. I watched Sarah flit around the room, laughing too loudly, pouring more wine, playing the perfect hostess. She was the star. I was the stagehand who paid for the lights. I retreated to the corner, watching Leo sit on a stiff armchair, reading. He looked so small in this house of big egos. Hey, Sarah appeared beside me again, smelling of Sauvignon Blanc. So, listen. Mark and I were thinking. Since you're doing so well, maybe you could help us with the Tesla payments. Just for a few months. Until Mark's big contract lands. I looked at her. You want me to pay for your car? It's not just a car, Chloe. It's about image. Mark needs it for meetings. Clients judge you by what you drive. Not everyone can drive whatever that thing is you drive. My car is paid off, Sarah. Don't be sanctimonious, she snapped, her mask slipping. You have the money. Dad told me about the bonus you got last year. You're sitting on it while we're actually trying to build a future. We're family. Family helps family. Family helps family, I repeated. Is that why Mom charged $2,000 to my emergency card for a spa day? Sarah's face went pale for a second, then she scoffed. She deserves it. She raised us. God, you count every penny. You're so bitter, Chloe. Just because David died doesn't mean you have to be miserable for the rest of your life and drag us down with you. The mention of David was a low blow. It was below the belt. But before I could respond, dinner was announced. We gathered around the long dining table. It was set beautifully, I'll give her that. But as I sat down, I noticed the name cards. Sarah, Mark, Mom, Dad, and the neighbors were at the main table. Leo and I were seated at a folding card table set up in the hallway, near the kitchen door. Sorry, Sarah shrugged from across the room. Not enough chairs. Plus, Leo spills things. I looked at my son. He didn't say anything. He just opened his napkin and placed it on his lap. It's okay, Mom, he whispered. It's quieter here. My heart broke. Not into two pieces, but into a million shards of glass. I wanted to grab him and run. But I stayed. Because I needed to see this through. I needed to see exactly who these people were. And they were about to show me. The dinner progressed. The noise level rose as the wine flowed. From our exile at the kids' table in the hallway, I had a direct line of sight to the main dining room. I could see them laughing, toasting to my parents' 40 years of sacrifice and love. I wasn't eating. I was watching. I was observing the way Mark refilled my father's glass, whispering things that made my dad nod approvingly. I watched my mother fawning over Sarah, touching her arm, looking at her like she was the second coming of Christ. Leo, are you full? I asked softly. I'm not hungry, he said, pushing a piece of expensive asparagus around his plate. Suddenly, silence fell over the main room. Sarah was standing up to make a toast. To Mom and Dad, she beamed, raising her glass. The best parents anyone could ask for. Thank you for always believing in me, for supporting Mark and me through everything. We love you. Everyone clapped. Then, Sarah's eyes drifted to the hallway. To us. And to Chloe, she said, her voice dripping with that faux sweetness that always preceded a sting. Thanks for, helping out with the bill. We know it's hard for you, doing it all alone. The room went quiet. It was patronizing. It was a power move disguised as gratitude. Then, it happened. Leo, trying to cut a piece of tough steak, slipped. His fork clattered loudly onto the tile floor of the hallway. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silence. Mark snorted. Graceful, kid. Real graceful. Leo's face turned bright red. He scrambled to pick it up. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Sarah smirked. It wasn't a smile. It was a smirk, cruel, superior, and ugly. She looked at her husband, then at the guests, and said the words that would end her life as she knew it. God, she sighed, loud enough for everyone to hear. Maybe if your son had two parents, he wouldn't be such a mess. He's so twitchy. He's broken, just like his mom. Time stopped. I felt the air leave the room. My mother didn't gasp. My father didn't scold her. My mother laughed. A short, nervous chuckle. Oh, Sarah, stop it, she said, but she was smiling. My son froze. He looked at me, his eyes welling up with tears he was fighting desperately to hold back. He looked down at his hands, believing her. Believing he was broken. Something inside me didn't just snap, it incinerated. The grief, the obligation, the desire to be the good daughter, it all burned away in a millisecond, leaving behind something cold and hard as diamond. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I stood up. I walked over to the main table. The click-clack of my heels was the only sound in the room. I stood directly behind Sarah. She turned, expecting a fight, expecting tears. She wanted a reaction. She wanted to be the victim of crazy Chloe. I leaned down, close to her ear, but spoke loud enough for the table. Interesting theory, Sarah, I said. My voice was calm. Terrifyingly calm. What? She blinked, her smile faltering. That my son is a mess because he lacks a father, I continued. Whereas you have a husband, and yet you're begging your widowed sister to pay for your Tesla because you can't afford the gas. Sarah's mouth dropped open. Excuse me. I looked at Mark. And you. The visionary. Maybe if you spent less time judging a 10-year-old and more time looking for a job, you wouldn't need to steal my dad's retirement money to pay for this facade. Chloe. My father stood up, his face purple. That is enough. You apologize to your sister right now. I turned to my father. For the first time in 36 years, I didn't flinch. No, I said. I reached into my purse. I pulled out the folder I had brought, the one with the spa receipts. I tossed it onto the pristine white tablecloth. It slid right into the butter dish. Here's the receipt for the gift Mom is wearing, I said. And the spa trip. Enjoy the shrimp. It's the last meal I'm paying for. I walked back to the hallway, grabbed Leo's hand, and pulled him up. We're leaving, I told him. You walk out that door, Chloe, and you're done. My mother shrieked. You are selfish. You've always been jealous of Sarah. I stopped at the door. I turned back one last time. I looked at the algae in the pool through the sliding glass door. I looked at the fear starting to creep into Mark's eyes. I'm not jealous, Mom, I said. I'm the auditor. And your audit is coming up. I opened the door and walked out into the humid night. The car ride home was silent for the first 10 minutes. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump of finally saying no. I glanced at Leo in the rearview mirror. He was wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "Don't you dare," I said fiercely, then softened my tone immediately. "Don't you dare apologize, Leo. You did nothing wrong. You dropped a fork. Everyone drops forks. The Queen of England drops forks. They hate me," he said. The simple truth of it hit me like a physical blow. They don't hate you, Leo. They hate themselves. And they use you to make themselves feel bigger. "Uncle Mark says I'm expensive," Leo said. I frowned, pulling the car over to the shoulder of the highway. I put the hazards on. I turned around in my seat to face him. "What did you say?" Leo shrank back a little. "Uncle Mark. Last time we were there. He caught me in the kitchen getting water. He said kids cost too much money. And then he asked me for my number." "Your phone number?" "No," Leo shook his head. "My social security number. He said he wanted to set up a college scholarship for me. Like a surprise. He said I shouldn't tell you because it would ruin the surprise." The blood in my veins turned to ice. "Did you give it to him, Leo?" I asked, keeping my voice very, very gentle. I have it memorized like you told me," Leo stammered. He said he was trying to help. He wrote it down on a napkin. "Did I do something bad?" I unbuckled my seatbelt and climbed into the back seat to hug him. I held him tight, rocking him back and forth. "No, baby. You were being a good boy. You were trusting your family. You did nothing wrong." But inside, my mind was screaming. Mark. That desperate, flashy, unemployed fraudster. He didn't want to start a scholarship. He needed a clean credit file because his was undoubtedly trashed. And he had targeted a 10-year-old boy. My 10-year-old boy. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a felony. I climbed back into the driver's seat. "Leo, we're going home. We're going to order the biggest pepperoni pizza in the world, and we're going to watch Godzilla." "Really? Really? But first, Mommy has to make one phone call." I didn't call the police. Not yet. I called the automated line for the credit bureau. I had the premium monitoring service for both myself and Leo, a habit from my line of work. I drove with one hand, listening to the robotic voice on the speakerphone. "We have detected 3 new accounts opened in the last 45 days. 3. First National Bank Visa. Credit limit, $5,000. Balance, $4,850. Amex Gold. Balance, $7,200. Personal loan. Lending Club. Balance, $10,000. Over $22,000 of debt. In my 10-year-old son's name." Mark hadn't just insulted my son tonight. He had stolen his future. He had mortgaged my child's identity to pay for his BMW lease and his whiskey. And my parents. They were enabling this parasite. They were feeding him my money. I looked at the road ahead. The tears were gone. The sadness was gone. "Mom?" Leo asked. "Are you mad?" "No, sweetie," I said, merging back onto the highway. The city lights reflected in my eyes, cold and sharp. "I'm not mad. I'm motivated. I wasn't just going to sue them. I was going to dismantle them. I was going to take apart their life, brick by brick, receipt by receipt." "Leo," I said. "Do you trust me?" "Yes." "Good. Because things are going to change. No more being nice. No more being quiet. We're going to fight back." The snap had happened at dinner. But the war declared in that car was nuclear. Sunday morning broke with a deceptive calm. While Leo slept in, safe in his bed, I was already 3 hours into my work. My dining room table, usually reserved for Leo's homework, was now a war room. I wasn't Chloe the sister. I was Chloe the senior forensic auditor. And I was good at my job. I started with the public records. In the United States, property records are surprisingly accessible if you know where to look. I pulled up the deed to Sarah and Mark's house in Oak Haven Estates. They bought it 3 years ago for $650,000. Way out of their budget even then. I dug deeper. Lien search. There it was. A second mortgage taken out 8 months ago, right around the time Mark lost his job. High interest rate. Predatory lender. And then, the kicker, notice of default. Filed 3 weeks ago. They were 90 days behind on their mortgage. They weren't just broke, they were drowning. The bank was circling. Foreclosure proceedings would start in less than a month. I sat back, sipping my cold coffee. This explained everything. The desperation. The aggression. The attempt to get me to pay for the Tesla, which was probably about to be repossessed too. They needed cash fast to keep the illusion alive. Then I turned my attention to Mark. I ran a background check using my professional software. Mark wasn't just unemployed. He had been fired for cause, embezzlement of petty cash from his last sales job. They hadn't pressed charges because the amount was small, under $5,000, and they just wanted him gone. But it was there in the employment verification notes, not eligible for rehire. He was a thief. A petty, small-time thief pretending to be a CEO. And he had used my son's SSN. I pulled up the credit report details for Leo. The charges were sickening. $400 at a steakhouse. $1,200 at an Apple store, probably a new iPhone for Sarah. $300 at a liquor store. They were eating and drinking on my son's credit. I felt a wave of nausea, but I pushed it down. Nausea doesn't win court cases. Evidence does. I printed everything. Every page. I organized them into binders. Binder 1, Property and Foreclosure. Binder 2, Mark's fraud and Leo's identity theft. Binder 3. Binder 3 was the mystery. Where was my parents' money going? My dad had a decent pension. I sent them $3,000 a month. They should be comfortable. Why did they need my credit card for the spa? Why did Dad mention his retirement money was gone during the argument last night? I needed to see their accounts. Technically, I couldn't access them without permission. But then I remembered. 3 years ago, when Dad had his heart scare, he made me a signatory on their main checking account just in case. I had never used it. I had forgotten about it. I logged into the bank portal. I typed in my credentials. Access granted. I scrolled through the transaction history for the last year. My jaw tightened. Every month on the 1st, my $3,000 transfer hit their account. And every month on the 2nd, there was a Zelle transfer of $2,500 to S_Miller_88. Sarah. They were funneling almost everything I gave them straight to her. I scrolled further. Large withdrawals. $5,000 here. $10,000 there. Description, cashier's check, Oak Haven mortgage servicing. My parents weren't just buying her groceries. They were paying her mortgage. They had drained their savings, their emergency fund, and were now living on credit cards, just to keep Sarah's house of cards from collapsing. And when they ran out, they came to me. They called me cheap. They let Sarah mock my son. All while handing her the money I earned with my blood and sweat. I slammed the laptop shut. The betrayal was so complete, so systemic, it was almost impressive. Mom? Leo was standing in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. He was wearing his dinosaur pajamas. Hey, buddy. Did you sleep okay? Yeah. Are you working? Sort of, I said, forcing a smile. I'm just cleaning up a mess. Is it a big mess? I looked at the stack of papers. The evidence of crimes, lies, and financial ruin. Yeah, Leo. It's a huge mess. But don't worry. Mommy has a really big broom. I picked up my phone. It was time to call in the heavy artillery. Siri, call Elias Vance. Elias was a shark. He was the kind of lawyer other lawyers hated. He cost $600 an hour, and he was worth every penny. Chloe, Elias answered on the second ring. It's Sunday. You never call on Sunday unless someone is dead or about to be. I have a job for you, Elias, I said. And I need a meeting with Mr. Sterling at the bank first thing Monday morning. Sterling. The VP of Distressed Assets. Why? Because, I said, running my hand over the foreclosure notice I had just printed. I'm going to go shopping. I want to buy a mortgage. Monday morning. The glass-walled conference room of First City Bank overlooked the skyline, but I was focused on the man across from me. Mr. Sterling was an old-school banker, suspenders, cigar smell, and a bottom-line mentality. Let me get this straight, Chloe, Sterling said, looking at the file I'd slid across the mahogany table. You want to personally purchase the non-performing note on 442 Oak Lane. The borrower is Mark and Sarah Miller. Correct, I said, my hands folded on the table. I know the bank is bundling these toxic assets to sell off to collection agencies for pennies on the dollar. I'm offering you 60 cents on the dollar. Cash. Today. Sterling raised an eyebrow. This is highly irregular. Usually, we sell these in bulk. And isn't this your sister? That's a conflict of interest I'm willing to waive, Elias Vance interjected smoothly from beside me. He was wearing a suit that cost more than Mark's car. My client is making a business decision. The property has equity. It's a secured investment. Sterling looked at me. He knew me. I had audited his branch 3 years ago, and saved him a fortune by catching a rogue loan officer. He respected me. If I sell you this note, Chloe, you become the bank. You hold the lien. You have the power to foreclose. You have the power to evict. I am aware of the responsibilities, I said. And you're prepared to do that? To family. I thought about the smirk. I thought about he's broken. I thought about the $22,000 debt on Leo's name. Mr. Sterling, I said coldly. They stopped being family when they stole my son's identity. Now they are just debtors. Sterling nodded slowly. He signed the paper. Sold. I walked out of that bank owning my sister's house. Next stop, the police station. This was harder. Walking into the precinct felt like crossing a line of no return. But I had binder number 2. I met with a detective in the fraud division. I laid out the credit card applications, the IP addresses I had traced, they matched Mark's home Wi-Fi, and the timeline. This is extensive, the detective said, whistling. Identity theft of a minor. Over $20,000. That's a felony, ma'am. If we pursue this, your brother-in-law is looking at jail time. Real time. I understand, I said. And the sister? Did she know? I don't know, I lied. I knew she knew. Sarah knew everything Mark did. But I wanted Mark first. He was the weak link. He would crack and drag her down with him. Just focus on Mark for now. We'll need a warrant to arrest him. Might take a few days to process everything. Take your time, I said. I want the timing to be perfect. I left the station feeling lighter. The pieces were moving on the chessboard. The queen was positioning herself to take the king. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. Mom, Chloe, please pick up. Sarah is crying. She feels terrible about dinner. We need to talk. I ignored it. Another buzz. Mom, it's not about money. We just want to fix this. We're a family. I ignored that too. Then, a notification from my bank. A reversal. Transaction reversed, $1,500 to Sarah Miller. I blinked. I hadn't reversed it. I called the bank. Did the recipient reject the transfer? No, ma'am, the operator said. It looks like the receiving account was frozen due to suspicious activity. The funds bounced back. I smiled. The credit card companies were catching on to Mark's fraud on Leo's cards. His accounts were getting flagged. The walls were closing in, and they didn't even know who locked the door. I drove to Leo's school to pick him up early. We went for ice cream. Mom, why are you smiling? Leo asked, licking a chocolate cone. Because, Leo, I said, wiping a smudge from his cheek. I bought a house today. We're moving. No. We're staying exactly where we are. But someone else might be moving soon. I was teaching my son a lesson in justice. It wasn't about revenge. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is messy. This was audit. Audit is about balancing the books. About making sure that what goes out matches what comes in. Sarah and Mark had taken too much. It was time for them to pay the balance. 3 days passed. The silence from my end was driving them crazy. I knew my family. They couldn't handle silence. They needed drama, conflict, yelling. Silence meant they had lost control. On Wednesday evening, the phone rang. It was Sarah. I put it on speaker so Elias, who was sitting in my living room reviewing the foreclosure timeline, could hear. Hello. I sounded tired, beaten down. I was a good actress. Chloe. Sarah's voice was high-pitched, frantic, but trying to sound cheerful. Oh my God, I've been trying to reach you. Look, about Saturday. I was drunk. Okay. I didn't mean it. You know how I get. Stress. It's okay, I said softly. I know. Really? She sounded surprised. She expected a fight. Oh, thank God. Mom was so worried. Look, we want to make it up to you. Mom's birthday is coming up next week. I want to plan a girls' trip. Just us and Mom. Maybe a weekend in Napa. I looked at Elias. He smirked. Napa. Another expensive trip she couldn't afford. She was fishing. She needed me to pay for it and probably use the opportunity to ask for that loan again. Napa sounds expensive, I said. Oh, don't worry about the money. Sarah lied. Mark's deal came through. We're flush. It's my treat. Seriously. I want to spoil my big sister and Mom. Please, Chloe. For the family. Mark's deal came through. The lie was so bold it was almost admirable. Mark's deal was stealing my son's identity, and the only reason they had cash was probably because they maxed out the last card before it got frozen. Okay, I said. I'll come. Yes. Amazing. Okay, come over to my house on Friday night. We'll have a planning dinner. Mom will be there. Bring Leo, Mark promises to be nice. We'll order sushi. Friday sounds perfect, I said. I actually have a surprise for you guys too. A big one. Ooh, a present. Greed dripped from her voice. Something like that. It's paperwork. For the future. Is it the investment thing Mark talked about? You could say that, I said. See you Friday, Sarah. I hung up. Elias laughed, a dry, barking sound. You're cold, Chloe. Paperwork for the future. That's cold. They invited me into their home to rob me, I said, gathering the binders. It's only polite that I return the favor. Friday came. I dressed up this time. I wore my power suit, a tailored black blazer, sharp heels, and my hair pulled back in a severe bun. You look like the boss in a video game, Leo said. I am the boss, baby. I left Leo with a babysitter. I wasn't going to let him near that house again. This was going to be ugly, and I wanted him protected. I drove to Oak Haven Estates. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the manicured lawns. I had the foreclosure notice in my briefcase. I had the police report in my briefcase. I had the bank statements in my briefcase. I pulled into the driveway. Mark's BMW was there. My parents' car was there. They were all inside, waiting. Waiting to manipulate me. Waiting to gaslight me. Waiting to take whatever scraps of dignity and money they thought I had left. I walked up the driveway. I didn't knock. I used the key they had given me years ago for emergencies. This was an emergency. Just not the kind they thought. I stepped into the foyer. The house was quiet, but I could hear voices in the dining room. She'll sign it, Mark was saying. She's soft. You saw how she folded when you called. She's desperate for approval. We get her to sign the power of attorney, tell her it's for managing Mom's estate, and then we can access her liquid assets to cover the bridge loan. I stopped. Power of attorney. They weren't just asking for a loan. They were planning to trick me into signing over control of my finances. Or perhaps they wanted me to sign over control of Mom's, so they could drain the last drops of her blood legally. I don't know, Mark, my father's voice. Chloe is smart with numbers. She's a bookkeeper, Dad, Sarah scoffed. She's not a financier. She doesn't understand high-level leverage like Mark does. Besides, she owes us. She's been hoarding that insurance money for 5 years while we struggle. Hoarding. Protecting my son's future was hoarding. I walked into the dining room. Hello, everyone. They all jumped. Mark spilled his wine. Chloe. You let yourself in, Sarah stammered, standing up. She looked nervous. Where's Leo? He's safe, I said, placing my heavy leather briefcase on the table. It made a solid thud. Safe? Weird word choice, Mark laughed nervously. Sit down, sit down. We ordered the sushi boat. It's on its way. I'm not hungry, I said. I remained standing. I looked at each of them. My mother, looking anxious. My father, looking grumpy. Sarah and Mark, looking like predators disguised as suburbanites. So, Mark rubbed his hands together. Sarah said you have a surprise. Some paperwork. I do, I said. But first, I heard you talking. You want me to sign something? Mark exchanged a look with Sarah. Ah, yes. Well, Dad and I were talking. Since Mom is getting older, we think it's best if the family assets are pooled. Managed by someone with market experience. Me. We drew up a little agreement. Just a formality. It gives me limited power to invest Mom's pension, and potentially, helps you optimize your portfolio too. He slid a document across the table. I didn't even pick it up. I could see the header. General Durable Power of Attorney. It wasn't limited. It was total. If I signed that, or if Mom signed that, Mark could empty our accounts in 10 minutes. You want to optimize my portfolio, I repeated. Exactly. Mark grinned. I can get you 15% returns. Easy. Like the returns you got on your last job? I asked. Mark's smile froze. What? The job you were fired from for embezzlement. Or the returns you're getting on this house, which is 90 days delinquent. The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Chloe, what are you talking about? Mom asked, her voice trembling. Mark is a consultant. Mark is a thief, I said calmly. How dare you? Sarah screeched. Get out. Get out of my house. Actually, I said, unclicking the latches of my briefcase. Snap. Snap. That's the funny part, Sarah. I pulled out the first document. The mortgage assignment. You see, I walked around the table, holding the paper up. This isn't your house anymore. The bank sold the note this morning. To a private investment firm. So what? Mark sneered, though sweat was beading on his forehead. Banks sell mortgages all the time. True, I said. But usually, they sell them to strangers. This time, they sold it to CJL Holdings LLC. Who is CJL Holdings? Dad asked. Chloe. Jennifer. Leo, I said. Me. I dropped the foreclosure notice on Mark's plate. I own your debt, Mark. I own your mortgage. I own this house. And since you are 3 months behind, I am exercising my right to accelerate the loan. You can't do that, Sarah whispered. I just did. You have 30 days to pay the full balance of $640,000, or you vacate the premises. You're bluffing, Mark stood up, his face red. You don't have that kind of money. You drive a Honda. I drive a Honda so I can afford to buy your life, I snapped back. And that's not all, I reached into the briefcase again. Binder number 2. I pulled out the credit report. Mom, Dad, look at this. I threw the papers at my parents. Look at the name on the credit card. Leo Miller. My mother picked up a sheet. Why does Leo have an Amex? Because Mark stole his identity, I pointed a finger at Mark, who was now backing away towards the wall. He used a 10-year-old's social security number to open credit cards because his own credit is garbage. That is a federal crime, Mark. It was a misunderstanding. Mark shouted. I was going to pay it back. Tell it to the police, I said. Just then, the doorbell rang. Ding dong. That must be the sushi, Sarah said, her voice sounding hysterical, detached from reality. No, I said, checking my watch. That's Detective Miller from the Fraud Division. I told him I'd be here to let him in. I looked at my sister. The smirk was gone. Her face was a mask of pure terror. You said Leo was broken, I said softly to her. You said I was a mess. But look at you now, Sarah. You're homeless. Your husband is going to prison. And you have nothing. I turned and walked to the front door to let the police in. I opened the front door. The humid night air rushed in, mixing with the sterile, air-conditioned scent of the house. Standing on the porch wasn't a sushi delivery driver. It was Detective Miller and 2 uniformed officers. They looked serious, the kind of serious that makes your stomach drop even if you've done nothing wrong. But I hadn't done anything wrong. I was the one finally making things right. Mrs. Sarah Miller. Mr. Mark Miller. Detective Miller stepped into the foyer, his badge catching the light from the chandelier. Mark scrambled back from the dining table, knocking his chair over. It crashed onto the hardwood floor with a deafening bang. This is a mistake, he stammered, his hands held up in front of him like he was trying to physically push the reality away. My sister-in-law, she's confused. It's a family dispute. A civil matter. Mark Anthony Miller, the detective ignored him, walking straight into the dining room. I have a warrant for your arrest for identity theft, credit card fraud, and larceny. No. Sarah shrieked. She looked from Mark to me, her eyes wide and manic. Chloe, stop this. Tell them to stop. You can't arrest him in front of our neighbors. Think of the reputation. I stood by the doorway, leaning against the frame. I crossed my arms. I am thinking about reputation, Sarah. Specifically, my son's credit reputation, which your husband destroyed. One of the officers moved behind Mark. Hands behind your back, sir. You don't understand. Mark was sweating profusely now, the confident, visionary facade melting away to reveal the scared con artist beneath. I was going to pay it back. It was a bridge loan. I have investors lined up. You can explain that to the judge, the officer said. The metallic click-click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. It signaled the end of the lie. My mother was sobbing now, clutching her napkin to her chest. Mark? Mark, tell them it's not true. Tell them Chloe is lying. Mark looked at my mother, then at Sarah. His eyes darted around the room, looking for a scapegoat. Then he looked at me with pure venom. You set me up. You jealous witch. You've always been jealous of us. I didn't force you to steal a 10-year-old social security number, Mark, I said calmly. You did that all by yourself. As they marched Mark out the front door, the neighbors, the same ones Mark had been bragging to at the anniversary party, were standing on their lawns, watching. The blue and red lights of the police cruisers painted the manicured hedges of Oakhaven Estates in a chaotic strobe. Mark Miller, the man who needed a Tesla for his image, was being shoved into the back of a squad car. Sarah stood in the open doorway, watching the car pull away. She looked small. She looked fragile. For a fleeting second, I felt a pang of pity. That was my little sister. But then I remembered Leo crying in the car because he thought he was expensive. The pity evaporated. She turned around, her mascara running down her face. Are you happy now? She hissed at me. You just ruined my life. You destroyed this family. I walked past her, back into the dining room where my parents were sitting in stunned silence. I began packing my documents back into my briefcase. I didn't ruin your life, Sarah. I just turned on the lights. If the room is ugly, that's not the fault of the light switch. How could you? My father spoke for the first time. His face was gray. He's family. You don't call the police on family. We handle this internally. Internally? I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Like how you handled my money internally. By funneling it to her. I snapped my briefcase shut. Mark is going to jail. And Sarah, you have a bigger problem. The 30-day clock on this house started this morning. I suggest you start packing. You can't be serious, Sarah whispered, walking back into the room. You're not actually going to kick me out. Where will I go? I have no money. I know, I said. I saw your bank statements. Maybe you can stay at the spa Mom likes so much. I looked at the sushi boat that had just been delivered, sitting untouched on the sidebar. Enjoy the sushi. It's the last thing you'll own in this house. I walked out to my car. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. It was done. The bomb had detonated. Now, all that was left was to clear the rubble. The next morning, my phone was blowing up. 37 missed calls. 20 from Mom. 10 from Dad. 7 from Sarah. And a string of text messages that ranged from begging to threatening. Mom, you have to drop the charges. Mark can't go to prison. He has a heart condition. Dad, you are disgracing us. Call the lawyer and stop the foreclosure. Now. Sarah, I'm going to sue you for emotional distress. I ignored them all. I sat at my kitchen table with Leo, making pancakes. He was humming a little tune, something he hadn't done in months. Mom, he asked, pouring syrup. Is Uncle Mark really a bad guy? He made bad choices, Leo, I said carefully. And when adults make bad choices that hurt people, there are consequences. It's called accountability. Like a timeout. A very long, very serious timeout. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I checked the camera. It was my parents. They looked haggard. My mother's eyes were puffy, and my father looked like he hadn't slept. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. I stood in the threshold, blocking the way. Chloe, my mother started, her voice trembling. We need to talk. Civilly. I'm listening, I said. You have to stop this, my father said, trying to summon his old authority. This foreclosure nonsense. You own the debt now, right? That means you can forgive it. Just write it off. Sarah will pay you back eventually. I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. Write off $600,000. Dad, do you hear yourself? She's your sister. Mom cried. She has nowhere to go. Mark is in holding. She's all alone in that big house. She's not alone, I said. She has you. And speaking of you, I pulled out the last piece of evidence from my back pocket, the one I hadn't shown them last night. The bank transfer history. I need to tell you something, I said, my voice hardening. The Bank of Chloe is officially closed. My mother froze. What? I know, I said. I know you've been taking the $3,000 I send you every month for your medicine and bills, and sending $2,500 of it to Sarah. I have the Zelle records. My father looked away, unable to meet my eyes. My mother turned red. She needed it. Mom defended. They were struggling. You have so much, Chloe. You have millions, we know you do. Why are you so greedy? It's not greed, Mom. It's betrayal, I said. I worked double shifts. I drove a beat-up car. I saved every penny to make sure you guys were comfortable in your retirement. And you took that sacrifice and threw it into Sarah's fireplace to keep her warm while she laughed at me. We didn't laugh at you, Dad muttered. You did, I corrected him. At the dinner. When she called my son broken. You laughed. And you paid for the wine she was drinking with my money. I took a step forward, and they instinctively took a step back. So here is the new deal. I am cutting off your allowance immediately. No more monthly transfers. No more credit cards. I canceled the supplementary card this morning. You can't do that. Mom gasped. How will we pay our bills? You have Dad's pension. It's enough for a modest life. If you need more, ask Sarah. Oh wait, Sarah has nothing. Maybe you should have saved the money I gave you instead of funding her delusions. Chloe, please, Dad's voice cracked. We're your parents. And I'm a mother, I said. My loyalty is to Leo. Every dollar I give you is a dollar I am taking from him to give to people who despise him. I'm done paying to be abused. If you do this, Mom hissed, her face contorting with ugly rage, don't bother coming for Christmas. Don't bother calling us. Mom, I smiled, and it felt genuinely peaceful. That is the best gift you could ever give me. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood and breathed. It was over. The toxic cord was cut. I walked back to the kitchen where Leo was finishing his milk. Who was that? He asked. Just some people selling things we don't need anymore, I said. The next 30 days were a blur of legal motions and desperate attempts by Sarah to delay the inevitable. She tried to file for bankruptcy, but because the mortgage was under Mark's name, and he was currently facing felony charges, the court froze everything. Elias Vance, my lawyer, was a shark in these waters. He blocked every maneuver. He ensured the foreclosure timeline stuck. On day 30, at 9 a.m., I pulled up to the house in Oakhaven Estates. This time, I brought a moving truck, not to help her, but to ensure she actually left. I also brought a sheriff's deputy, just in case. The lawn was already overgrown. The for sale signs that Sarah had frantically planted in the yard had sold stickers on them, but not the kind she wanted. I had already transferred the property to a holding company to be liquidated. I walked inside. The house was a wreck. Boxes were everywhere. Sarah was sitting on a suitcase in the foyer, looking 10 years older. Her designer clothes were wrinkled. Her hair was messy. "You're actually doing it," she said dully as I entered. "You're throwing your own sister onto the street." "I offered you a deal," I reminded her. "I told you if you signed over the deed voluntarily and admitted to Mom and Dad what you did, I'd give you $5,000 for a deposit on an apartment. You refused. You called me a liar." "I thought Mark would get out," she whispered. "I thought he would fix it." "Mark is looking at 5 to 7 years, Sarah. He isn't fixing anything." I walked through the house with a clipboard, doing my final inspection. I noticed something missing in the kitchen. "Where is the Sub-Zero fridge?" I asked. Sarah looked away. "I sold it. Needed cash for the lawyer." "That is a fixture of the house, Sarah. You sold property that belongs to the lien holder. That's theft." "Again." "Oh my God, are you going to arrest me for a fridge?" she screamed, standing up. "Take it. Take everything. You want the blood from my veins too?" "No," I said calmly. "I just want you out." My parents arrived a few minutes later with their station wagon to pick her up. They didn't look at me. They walked past me like I was a ghost. They started loading Sarah's Louis Vuitton suitcases into the trunk. As Sarah walked out the door, she stopped. She turned to me. "I hope you rot in this big empty house, Chloe. I hope you're lonely." "I'm not living here," I said. "I'm selling it. The proceeds will go back into Leo's trust fund. The one you guys tried to drain." "You're a monster," Mom spat as she held the car door open for Sarah. "No, Mom," I said. "I'm the auditor. And the audit is closed." I watched them drive away. The house was silent. I felt a profound sense of lightness. I walked through the empty rooms, the echo of my heels the only sound. I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. 2 weeks later, the court date arrived. Mark had taken a plea deal. To avoid a lengthy trial and a potential 10-year sentence, he pleaded guilty to identity theft and wire fraud. I sat in the back of the courtroom. I didn't bring Leo. He didn't need to see this. Mark walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked small. The arrogance was gone. He looked at the gallery, searching for Sarah. She wasn't there. She hadn't come to support him. Loyalty, it seemed, was only for when the checks cleared. The judge was stern. "Mr. Miller, stealing from a child is a particularly heinous act. It betrays a fundamental trust. I am sentencing you to 4 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of probation. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $22,000 to the victim." Mark slumped. As I walked out of the courthouse, I saw Sarah. She was waiting by my car. She looked different. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, no makeup. She looked tired. "Chloe," she said. "Sarah," I unlocked my car door. "I have to get back to work. I wanted to say." She hesitated. "Mom and Dad are driving me crazy. Their apartment is tiny. I'm sleeping on the couch. It's impossible." "That sounds difficult," I said neutrally. "I was wondering," she bit her lip. I know you have the spare room. And you travel for work sometimes. Maybe I could stay with you. Just for a few weeks. I could watch Leo. Save you money on babysitting. I stared at her. Even now, after everything, she still thought she could use me. She still thought she had an angle. She wanted to babysit the child she called broken. Sarah, I said, looking her dead in the eye. You will never be alone in a room with my son again. But no, I said firmly. You aren't a victim here. You were an accomplice. You enjoyed the money Mark stole. You ate the sushi bought with my son's credit. Figure it out. Get a job. Grow up. I got in my car and slammed the door. I didn't look back as I drove away. The rearview mirror is for checking traffic, not for dwelling on the wreckage you left behind. 6 months later. The auditorium lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. I sat in the third row, my hands clasped tightly together. On stage, a small figure in a tuxedo walked out to the grand piano. He adjusted the bench. He adjusted his glasses. It was Leo. He placed his hands on the keys. He took a deep breath. And then he began to play. It wasn't a simple song. It was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. It was complex, melancholic, and utterly beautiful. His fingers danced across the keys with a confidence I hadn't seen in him a year ago. I watched him, and I saw the transformation. The twitchy, anxious boy that Sarah had mocked was gone. In his place was a young artist, focused and proud. When the final note faded into the silence, the audience erupted. I stood up, clapping until my hands stung. Tears streamed down my face, happy tears this time. Leo stood up and bowed. He found me in the crowd and smiled. A real smile. A smile that said, I am not broken. After the recital, we went for ice cream to celebrate. You were amazing, baby, I said, smoothing his hair. Thanks, Mom, he said, digging into his sundae. Hey, guess what? I got an A on my math test today. That's my boy, I beamed. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Sarah Miller has viewed your profile. I clicked on her profile. It had been updated. Sarah Miller, shift supervisor at Target. I smiled. It was an honest job. Maybe, just maybe, she was finally learning the value of $1. I put the phone down. I didn't care. They were a distant memory, like a bad movie I had watched a long time ago. My parents were still living in their small apartment, living off the pension. They had tried to reach out a few times, usually around the first of the month, but I had changed my number. I heard from Aunt Marge that they were finally being forced to budget. Dad had even taken up a part-time job as a greeter at Walmart to pay off their own credit cards. Justice isn't always a gavel banging in a courtroom. Sometimes, justice is simply letting people live the life they can actually afford. Mom, Leo asked. Are we rich? I looked at him. I looked at our life. It was peaceful. It was safe. No one was stealing from us. No one was mocking us. Yes, Leo, I said. We are very rich. But not because of money. Because of love, he asked cheesily. Because of freedom, I said. And because we have each other. And because nobody tells us what to do. That night, after tucking Leo in, I went to my home office. I opened my laptop. I logged into my investment account. The money from the sale of Sarah's house had cleared. I transferred every cent of profit, about $150,000 after paying off the bank note, into Leo's college fund. I labeled the transaction, the Smirked tax. I closed the laptop. If there is one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this: your value is not determined by your family's opinion of you. You are not an ATM. You are not a doormat. And if someone tells you that you or your children are broken, you look them in the eye, you smile, and you show them exactly how strong the broken pieces can be when they are forged in fire. Don't let them win. Document everything. Keep your receipts. And when the time comes, don't be afraid to pull the trigger. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to stand up to a bully in your own family, comment justice down below. I read every single comment. And if you want to hear more stories about people getting exactly what they deserve, make sure you subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next.